Okay, so I am adjusting this outdoor shot. This is a horse stable on a $1 million property. Not that it matters, but it was a nice one. We're gonna click on outside sharp grass, and you see everything just tightens up there. And then we're gonna hit our normal sliders. And just watch for what seems too bright, what seems too dim, and you land it in the middle somewhere, just below too bright. You know, there's not a lot of blue in the sky here, but I'm also looking for that. You know, I want to make sure the color and the tone of the side of the building is right, but you know, that's obviously too dark. And people would maybe go with that, but not if I have an option a little further up here. And take these shadows and watch what happens. So the shadows outside are gonna affect the trees, and shadows will always affect wood, indoors or outdoors. So we see how much we want to see without making everything too bright. So I like to, if you watch those trees back there, I like to bring in those trees a little bit, make them look, you know, still alive and healthy. When they're blown out, you know, when you do that and bring it down, it makes it seem a little more realistic, but everything's still nice and bright. And then we do the same thing with the darks. You know, and what happens here when you start getting down to right about there, so we're at, on this one, we're on -34. Everything looks really good. It doesn't look too contrasty, and I'll show you that. That's this, where these greens and yellows here, and I mean all of it just looks way too contrasty. I mean, here's 0. I mean, sometimes bring it down. My preset is on like -13, so you bring it down, kind of brings the, I always call it kind of the richness of the colors back, because you've made everything bright. It starts to kind of wash it out a little bit. So bring that down. There's a reason I landed on 13 for my preset, because usually that's a good area. And then I've always got my greens right here. Otherwise, they always just seem too bright to me. So obviously that's bright green. And, you know, here's 0. I always darken the grass up a little bit. You know, darker grass just looks a little healthier. So that looks good. Otherwise, it can get too almost like a fluorescent green. So anyway, my preset's on -20. And that's fine. Let's see. And then we deal with our distortion. So, as you know, hopefully by now, or if not, it's the first time hearing it, is that almost every photo it needs to be rotated. I mean, if you really consider what's happening, it just does. So there's the rotating it, and we've got our vertical, which I'm sure I'm covering in another video. So that's this building. It's an outdoor building. And there's your before and after. This is tilted down, not nearly as bright and nice. So that's that one. You know, I wasn't sure that I was going to do it, and it's actually a flare right here. It's kind of an odd spot, and the size is big. But anyway, I took and removed these 2 flares right here. I didn't want anybody to think I was going to leave them there. But anyway, we've got some interior shots of this, and you'll notice I've got 2 different exposures. I do that a lot, and it's really it's a quick choice. You can figure out which one looks better. Sometimes I'll even apply the preset to both. I have a feeling that this one will be better just because it's the lower exposure. It's easier to bring it up in Lightroom than to take high exposures and bring them down. But anyhow, outside, this is kind of my go-to when I'm outdoors. Let's see what that one does. Yeah, and you see the biggest effect is out here, and that's the reason I do it, is for windows. And you know, essentially this is a big window. You can see the difference, and then start working from there. Because I start working from here, this is already really blown out up here. So I'll take this exposure and start knocking it up. And I'll still check it, because this wood right now is looking a little too orangey, but this doesn't look as much. So if I'm not getting a huge benefit, I may choose the other one. Start looking up at how clean all this is up in here. But let me take a look here. Yeah. I gotta fix that preset. Not to include saturation. Yeah, with those being my main three sliders, I think I like this wood tone better. This is a little deep, a little orange for me. It was a little bit lighter when we were there, so let me take this and tone it down. The reason I'm taking that saturation out of that wood, if you start saturating the wood, you see what happens to the color. Obviously the green, but wood, if you've got wood indoors or anywhere and you've got the saturation on or up, it'll just immediately start changing it. It's easier to just leave it off. Because when you start darkening, you see it does the same thing. It starts turning it a little more yellow, and so if you have the saturation and this turning the wood yellow, then you got a bunch of orange wood on your hands. So that probably looks better than that. I don't know. It's a toss-up. No, it's not. That's better. I think that's a cleaner photo. The other funny thing that happens when I use these lower exposures is you can see where the sensor, and I don't know how that works exactly, I put so much light into a different place. Watch it shift. Now it's all out here. But this isn't horrible out here, so I'm willing to accept it. If this was real blown out and I needed to save it, I'd figure out a way to make this one work. This isn't horrible, but I think this looks a little cleaner. And let me make it just a touch brighter too. And I'm always going to take and adjust that, even the vertical, and just see if all of a sudden some doors look like they're making more sense. I don't even think I needed this distortion. I believe I was on my 24 to 105. No, I'm on 10 millimeter. So I'll give it a bump. Right there, that 5. So that looks good. So in this case, I'll even, that's a better photo. I'll delete this one. Sometimes I'll leave it for people to make the choice. Let's see. So ideally, this is the same interior. I think I'm pointed at a different door, but my point is the light shouldn't be that dramatically different where I can't do a copy and paste. Let's see. Yeah. So that looks better. Very slight adjustment, but it definitely was an improvement. So we'll brighten this up. Gonna bring those shadows down just a little bit, and if you look where it's making a difference, obviously in the shadow, but these woods right here and the wood right here, and you see that a lot indoors. Some people really think that this shadows has something to do with the brightness of the whole picture, and I always bring that up, is that it doesn't. Some cases it does, but usually not so much. So, you know, why not add back in some of those shadows if it's going to make this piece look nicer? And a lot of times it brings back the wood from looking washed out or a different color. You know, through darker woods is a huge difference. So let's get this straightened up. I'm looking at this door right here. Let's see what happens with that. Oh, it looks pretty good. Look at this ladder. So I'm looking at two things. When I look at this grid line right here, I'm looking at how close the top of this door and the bottom of this door are to the straight line. And then I'm also looking over here at this line over here and seeing what happens if it looks weird. And then I'm also kind of looking at the ladder, but you know, I don't want this to look weird. So I'm here, and this is a little further, so I may be able to do a vertical. Yep. So you see, it's closer here and further here. Now I can actually do a vertical and have it make sense. But it throws that off. So we don't want to do that. We just leave it be and let that look nice and straight. This is straight. So I'm going to hit paste again and see what I get. Yeah, this got rich and this got rich. You know, there wasn't a huge adjustment, and I think on the last one I had to up the exposure a little bit, so I will. Just brighten it up in here. Just a bit. See, I go high and low. Let's see which one's which. Another thing you'll hear me talk about is there's certain times I look at this number, but a lot of times I don't. I stare at the photo while I go up and down to see what looks best, and that is a big deal. There's a lot of people out there that talk about the you know, oh, it's plus whatever, or you know, minus this. You look at the photo and see what makes most sense for the photo. You know, like this is obviously very far to the right, taking shadows out. You start adding these shadows back on this particular photo. You add a little bit of dimension over here. So anyway, that's that. This little thing needs to come out, this little door. So see that? Boom, boom. And I go like that. Straightened it right up. The way I shoot these now is so that managing the distortion isn't as tough. I used to shoot a little further down on the towards the floor to make more floor show up, and it was causing me a lot of problems with my lines. But anyhow, this line is straight up and down. These all look good. This all looks good. So the reason a lot of this looks so nice over here is because there's a lot of light in here. And when there's not a lot of light, then the camera has to try to pull extra light out of that light source to make the image equal what you're telling it you want it to equal as far as the brightness goes. And so the sensor, you know, the shutter will stay open while the sensor feeds off of this light, and then you get these flares. This isn't even so much as a flare, but an aberration near the edges. And anyway, you can see that this is way more blown out than this is. You know, you don't see any of that fringing or any of that over here. Anyhow, that's something that I have had no one say anything about. I used to be real concerned about it. There's times that, depending on the location, I may bring it up. If it's like a dark dining room, and they're like, "Hey, get a view out of the window," I'll let them know. I'll be like, "Hey, there's bright sun out there. You might get a little bit of blue around the windows," but it's never come up. So I wanted to bring it up. I'm gonna click this. Yeah, see how funky that looks. And then do this. Yeah, it didn't help much. So, the trick here just to get bright. There, it doesn't look as weird. When you're down low, that looks even muddier, I guess would be the way to describe it. So anyway, they want to see the inside of this stall. They can see it. They can see some trees. Looks good. Then we're gonna fix this frame right here. And then I'm gonna start looking at this door. Yeah. So something I'll go over in when I'm talking about distortion is how to balance between and I dealt with this just recently, you know, getting this to stand up correctly and getting this to stand up correctly, because you can do that and have, you know, like what I just did right here, and have it looking straight up and start rotating it and have it tilted, you know, but now this door looks great. So it's like, okay, do I want the door to look great? Sometimes it's a balance between the two. And plus I'm only at 5. Let's see if that pushes it out some. Yeah. I mean, I think that looks fine. The other line I always, you know, look at is the corner. I mean, this photo looks great like this. Obviously looks way better than it did. And it's a horse stall, which, you know, I don't want to discount anything. I want every photo to look great. You know, sometimes I'd even come in here and pick some of this junk off of here. You know, why not? Oops. Make that look a little bit nicer in the door area. There, we don't have to let junk at the bottom of the door. So that's that one. Oh, we probably did a lower exposure. Now we've got the inside of a garage. I'll do this interior no contrast. You see it really tightens up the colors. That didn't brighten anything up, but this exposure slider will. So that's that. That's that one. That's that one. I think we're good. Everything looks good there. So this Captain Obvious here, you know, obviously an interior shot. It's that garage. Interior sharp. Oh, interior right here. Doesn't look like that made much of a difference. Says that it did. Bring it up. See, this light wood doesn't mind the shadows as much, so we can make this look pretty bright, and it's not blowing the windows out. And that brings, again, kind of brings the, I used to say it would make things solid again. You know, now all this wood and everything looks real. It doesn't look all hazy and blown out. And doing these countertops at an angle like I do can get a little tricky, but it's not too tough. You just make sure it looks the way it would look if you were there. It's kind of the philosophy I have on a lot of this. You know, I want to make sure certain lines match up, but, you know, what are we at 1.5? As long as we're not, you know, twisted like that makes no sense. And I don't even think that makes a lot of sense. It looks like it's sloping. So I bring that around. I end up at 1.7 was a different number, but I think that looks pretty good. I may end up back at 1. Yeah, I think I was at 1.3. That looks good. This window looks right. That looks regular across the board there. So now we're back outside. See, sometimes that'll only make a small difference up here when you hit the outside sharp. I had grass on there because that's when I discovered that I could do the preset and bring that green down. So same old sliders, you know, taking a look here. And then, of course, again, the shadows affects these bushes. And not a whole lot else. It's all this undercarriage of these plants. And, you know, sometimes a lot of people, you see, they just go straight out and they blow it out like that. And agents are okay with that. Well, you know what? I happen to think that if you give a little bit of life back to these plants, a little bit of depth, then the photo has more dimension. I mean, that's kind of the definition of HDR, you know, high dynamic range, is having highlights, having nice, you know, darks in here. And if you take it all out, then you don't have there's nothing dynamic about it, right? There's no range about it. So, it sounds silly, but it's true. So this is a good example of things start getting real contrasty when you bring the darks down too much. You see how everything looks. And I think this is still too bright. So again, we have a touchdown. We're at -18, which is real common. You know, it's another one I do outside a lot of times is I'll mess with these greens and I'll take a look like that. You know, I'm looking at this tree right here and the leaves here. I didn't like it as far down to the, you know, here. But they, you know, these leaves look a little bit nicer on the bright side. You know, I have this at -20. Point being, you know, each photo has to be adjusted for what it is. You can have presets get you going, which is what I've done. I use a preset and kind of sends things in the right direction. But presets aren't the, you know, the end all to every photo. Here's another thing under here. You know, take this contrast, bring it down. You know, there it is at +7. There it is out. I think it looks better with low contrast on this photo. So just went from this photo, and if you notice I'm hitting copy, I'll just show you a difference of what's going on. You know, we're really close to this stuff, and so the lighting's totally different. And you go out here and you hit paste. You know, things are a little green. Not horrible, but it's the point is that doing a copy and paste in two different environments. I mean, this house is what, 20 feet away, 30 feet away. The light is going to apply differently, so the sliders are going to need to be in different places. That is something that you'll really discover if you're using the copy and paste effectively. And usually it's in when you find where the slider needs to be in one particular type of room or situation, and you've got 3 photos behind it, you can, you know, hit paste as a starting point, because you still want to adjust the sliders. You know, again, look at what it's doing to all these trees and all of what's going on under here. You know, I need to figure out what's important and how it looks. And I think in this particular case, it looks pretty neat. I'm pulling all the shadows out over here. It looks super clean. Yeah, it doesn't look bad, but I think that looks a little bit cooler over there. You know, if I had anything weird going on with the greens, I think the presets that you'll have, these will be down, the vibrance and the saturation, but I leave them up. So if I was ever having an issue where like these bushes were way too greeny, I would first flatten those out. Even those +5s will make a difference, is my point. You see how washed out that looks? And bring that down. We get real contrast. So that's regular. Normally around here, I'll bring it down somewhere about like -30. See, and that's why we don't look at the number. I just go off of the feel, because that's a little high. I'll bring that down. Yeah, we end up near the same spot here. And we got some greens. See, I like that way better than that. And what happens when I darken this grass up is it brings your eye and the attention up to this house. When all this is all bright, it makes everything, makes this blend in with this, and the house is just kind of there. You know, and that grass doesn't look too dark. Oh, that, you could even have that pass in this particular case. But anyway, that's super dark. And bring that grass down to about here. Yeah, in the 20s. I think that looks good. And there's nothing that can be done about this sky unless we go in afterwards and do a sky replacement or something like that, which in this case is not called for. And then I'm always hitting these sliders to see what happens if I can get an improvement, you know, on these lines over here. Let's see what it looks like. You know, obviously my biggest concern, right, is always the front door and all of this, but you know, everything looks pretty good on this photo. I'm obviously pointing up at the house, and you know, these lines don't always have to be absolutely vertical. It's nice to get them close, you know, but what happens is a lot of times you'll do that and you'll start to tweak some other ends of the house or even the porch. And you don't want to get too crazy with that. So, you know, that's vertical at 0. And I don't think I'm hurting anything by bringing this down, truthfully. Those trees aren't getting weird on me or anything. I got that line looking good. I may twist it just a touch. Yeah, so there's another one. Another outside shot. As I flick through that, it almost seems a little dim. Bring that up a touch. So we're going to hit copy on that one. What a difference. You know, our sky is blowing out. These are some clouds. We have some storms going over. But this one's going to be pretty close. So, a little bright. Bring that down. Bring some attention in on this house. Do my darks. And again, I do that strictly off of feel while I stare at the image. And just figure out what looks too high, what looks too low. I go, what's too high, and then I kind of land in the middle here. Yeah. A lot of times I end up in the same spot. So we have a lot of grass here again. In this case, with the numbers, I'll remember what the number is in case I want to go back there, because I think this looks fine. But again, I may find something that looks better, but I don't want to go messing around. You see how sensitive the number, how quick it changes. The point is, I need to remember it's negative 13. I do that a lot. So here, yeah, like too high, probably too low. Yeah, I like it darker. I keep ending up around, so I'll do it and I glance over. I end up in the 30s twice. And then at 47, I'm back down to 38. So yeah, that looks better. And I was at, what, 13 and I liked it. So I increased it just a touch darker. I mean, that's not much, but it makes a difference. 37. And I see a difference, so that's that. Way much twisting. This building looks really good as far as its being straight up and down. So we don't want to go twisting on it too much. You know, trying to mess with this or anything. We end up with a 0.3. There we go. So yeah. And then we've got this little cloud issue going on up here. So I need to deal with that. A lot of times I remove things when it comes to like a little dark cloud and a blown out sky. We can just use the adjustment brush. I've lowered the flow down recently and I've got my feather way up. Hold on. Oops. So I want to get after this cloud because it's distracting and nobody wants a dark cloud over their house. Get in here kind of tight. Alright. And then what I do is I make, when the adjustment goes down, I make it dark so I can see exactly where I'm coloring. And then I bring it up. So we just blow that cloud out. Yeah. Alright. So that's that.